Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be going over landscape photos, camera settings, how to locate a good landscape photo even before the landscape photo is there. Oftentimes you need like a good sunset or sunrise to actually make the photo an art-worthy or print-worthy photo. Just taking photos in the middle of the day of pretty locations typically doesn't generate a good photo. We're going to go over how to stabilize the camera even if you don't have a tripod, camera settings, locations, what I would do in certain situations to get different looks to the photo or a different feel, a different vibe. The first thing we're going to talk about is how to locate a good landscape photo. There's two ways you can do it. You can either drive around and look for them, scout out, use Google Maps, and check these locations, see if they're lined up with the sun or the moon. There's apps that can tell you where the sun direction will be and the moon direction. So I don't use those, I kind of just use the scout and look method myself. But if you do your research, you can find a good location like this location that we're at here. I know because I've been here before with a good sunset that if we get some low-hanging clouds up here and the sun sets over there, it will be a beautiful pink and orange sky. You want to look for like clouds that are not where the sun is going to set so that they reflect the light off of them. That's what gives you that pretty pink and orange color in the sky. If the clouds are low on the horizon, you're going to end up with a sunset that happens before it's supposed to, and it'll just appear darker than it's supposed to. You're not going to get those pretty colors. So if you're driving and you're close to a beach, the sun is almost setting and you see the clouds that will make a good sunset, then drive to the place where you know there is a view of the, a good view, a good photo. You can kind of sit and wait and hopefully get a very quality print-worthy photo. Hopefully get some bird photos too while I'm here. The second thing I'm going to talk about is stabilizing the camera. A tripod is very important, but it's not as important with landscape photography because you can set the camera on a rock or on a park bench or just brace it on your knee or any way that you can stabilize the camera, because typically you use a slower shutter speed. You want to get all of the light. You want a nice wide angle lens. Aperture is usually between f11 and f14, so you get good depth of field, because you want everything nice and clear. You don't want anything blurry unless that's the effect that you're trying to get. Sometimes with water like this, if you know the wind is blowing and the water is moving, you can set the shutter speed lower than it's supposed to be and actually makes the water look like a flowy cloud. That's how you get these waterfall photos. I'm sure you've seen one before where it looks like the water is a cloud. That's how you do that. You do it with stabilizing the camera, whatever you can to keep the camera still. You open the shutter speed up so that it has a slower shutter speed, higher aperture, so that the photo is still exposed properly. You let the camera take the photo with the water moving so that it appears like it's out of focus, but it makes that blurry kind of cloud look to the photo, and it can be a very appealing style of photography. You don't really need a super expensive lens to do landscape photography. Obviously, a better piece of equipment is going to take a better photo, but I have some very quality print-worthy photos that I took with my 24 to 100 kit lens. I since upgraded to a 24 to 70, which has a lower aperture so that I could do portraits and better lower light landscape photography. The other method is the drive around and hope you get lucky method, which I happen to have some very nice photos from that method, but that's not really very consistent. You kind of just gotta look for whatever you're driving around nearby when the sun is going down or when the sun is coming up, and you can get some nice photos that way as well. I feel like the research method is probably more consistent. You can produce better photos if you the first hour and a half of daylight and the last hour and a half of daylight are typically best for landscape photos, any kind of landscape photos. If you're taking a picture of the leaves changing in the mountains, the light is just better when it's coming in from the side. I think that's pretty typical for most photography. If you're taking midday photos, it's very difficult to get a really quality photo. You want to try to find areas where there's not as many people in the photo, because if you start cropping or erasing a bunch of stuff out of the photo, it can be okay, but typically it doesn't look as authentic, and you can get pieces that you miss or stuff like that that will ruin the photo if you try to print it and sell it to someone, they might not be happy with that. So I always try to find places where there's not going to be a lot of people. If there is a lot of people, like in this situation, I have the van backed up to the beach so that no one will typically be behind the van, and I know that's where the sun is going to set, so I can set up my tripod and no one's going to be in front of the photo. In addition to making flowy water, it often makes a good photo if it's not 100% clear and you use the lower aperture and you have something in the foreground like a leaf or some different colored rocks, and then the background has that nice pink and orange soft sky, which will create an effect that draws the eye towards whatever it is that you're trying to highlight in the photo. Or you can also do the same thing with a higher aperture. You can get the sunset and the whatever is in the foreground to be clear so that you have that style photo. It really just depends on what your style of photography is. Now, some of my best landscape photos, I had to visit the location 4 or 5 times before I got the sunset I was looking for, or the look that I wanted from that location. Having the ability to visualize what the photo would look like is something that I think you get the more you do photography, but it's really beneficial for landscape photography. If you drive past a nice pond or some mountains, but it's midday, and most people will just stop and take a photo in midday, but if you come back when the sun is lower or you have a nice sunset, that's what really separate your photo from someone that's shooting in midday or just shooting whatever they see, because you plan out your attack on the location. You can do a little bit of research on where the sun is going to be. You can find the correct spot to get the perfect angle so that you can get everything in the photo that you want and not be in a rush to do that. Like I said, sometimes I visited a place 5 times before I got the photo I wanted. Just imagine the sun coming down right here in between this tree, and that will give you a much better photo because it kind of frames up the sunset versus just a straight open, sunset over water. You kind of use the tree to your advantage. Same thing with a stump like this. Just imagine how much better the photo would be if you laid it out exactly like this, but then you have the sun dropping either behind the stump or with the stump off to the right hand side like I have it in this frame. It would add to the photo and make for something to make the photo better and make it more interesting. I now know where this stump is at. That direction is west, so the sun sets over there. If I had a day where there was some clouds up in the sky and I knew I was gonna get a nice cotton candy sunset, I would come back here, I would set up my tripod, and I would wait for the sun to go down so that I could get a quality photo of the sun setting with the stump. Another thing that works really well is grass. You just put a little bit of grass in the right hand corner or across the bottom of the photo. In this case, I want to get the beach with the early morning sunrise or a sunset with some pretty clouds over there. But adding the grass in the corner here will add to the photo. If you're gonna do landscape photography and you don't have an expensive tripod, the one I bought is a little bit more expensive, but I use it for wildlife as well. You can get a cheaper tripod and you can spread the legs out real far like this. This will allow you, the camera, not to shake as much because the surface area is much larger. I don't personally use this tripod for photography at all, but I did at one point. I don't like how this long shaft comes up because I feel like it sets the camera up too high, and then you get more room for movement. I've waited all day, and it appears we have some clouds rolling in, and it looks like we're gonna have a good sunset. The wind is really blowing, so I think I'm gonna go for the motion blur on the water style photo, because I don't think I'm gonna get a sharp reflection or anything like that with the wind blowing. Hopefully we get a nice blurry water and a beautiful sunset. All right, this is the photo that I like the best out of that set from the sunset at the beach. I would have gone over the settings during the actual shooting of the photo, but my YouTube camera died and I didn't have a charger. As always, I was using a tripod, so I was able to keep the ISO at 100, which is where I like it the best. Typically, you don't need to add ISO if you're using a tripod. Aperture f13, which is right in that range I stated previous in the video, between f11 and f14. Shutter speed 30 seconds, which is as slow as it would go. That's how I was able to get this flowy looking cloud-like water that kind of makes a dreamy look to the photo. I was using a little bit of zoom because there was some people standing on the edge of the photo right here when it was zoomed all the way out, and I didn't want to have to just cut them out, so I just cut them out with the zoom. The first thing we're gonna do is straighten this up a little bit because it's a little crooked, something like that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of exposure. Appears now that the sky is overexposed, but this is exposed correctly, so we're going to edit the sky separately. The other thing we're going to do is take some of the highlights away. I feel like when you do sunsets, that kind of makes the clouds look nicer. We're going to add a little bit of vibrance to this, and vibrance increases the purple and the turquoise more than saturation, and like you could really get carried away with saturation and ruin the photo. So I typically would use vibrance more than saturation, but if I use saturation, it's minimal, you know, like it's not like I'm trying to make the sky pretty. The sky is already pretty. We're just trying to fine-tune it a little bit. Now that we have this part of the photo exposed and edited the way that we want, we're gonna go here, we're gonna select the sky. Whenever you take landscape or sunset photos, it's very difficult to expose the foreground and the sky correctly at the same time, just because of the nature of the situation. So I would typically expose the foreground. I would put my focus point somewhere way out here in the middle. Like I said, set the aperture at somewhere between f11 and f14. That will make the whole photo clear. You typically want to overexpose the sky just a little bit so that the foreground is exposed correctly. That's why I said I would expose this correctly. And then you darken the sky, because if you go adding exposure to this part of the photo, it will make it grainy, or it will make it grainier. It's less grainy when you take away exposure. Anyway, that being said, we're gonna subtract some of this exposure. We're going to, I feel like it's a little oversaturated now, so we're going to take some of that away. I'm also going to use just a little bit of the dehaze, and that's all I would do with it. I think it's really cool looking. It's got a dreamy, pretty look to it. You could, if you wanted, take these boats out, but I think, you know, for me, they're cool. I like them. Thanks for watching, guys. I really enjoy making these kind of videos in this format, and I hope you guys are learning something. If you're not, hit me up with a comment, let me know, or if you are, and you like the way that I'm doing these videos, then also I'd like to hear from you. I'd love the feedback. I know I said in the last 2 videos that I was going to go do landscape photos, a landscape video. I need to be a little bit more organized, I guess, about my approach on the videos. But next week, I'm headed to the Canaveral seashore. I've never been over there before doing photography, so I don't really know what to expect, but I've heard there is spoonbills, there is skimmers, ospreys. People claim to see a flamingo every now and then, so hopefully we're going to get something good to take a photo of, and I'm going to take you guys with me on the road through the whole process of whatever I find over there, and I'll give you some tips about the actual national park as well. If you enjoyed this video and you also like wildlife photography, I'll attach a video right here of a barred owl that I shot in the Withlacoochee River, and I put some tips and tricks in there for wildlife photography and locating them as well. So I'll see you over there.